All right, it is 7:33 on Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. We're going to call the regular council meeting to session. We are virtual this evening. Shannon, please call the roll.
Bellin?
I am here.
Mr. Barr?
Here.
Mrs. Stauffer?
Here.
Mr. Scafidi?
Here.
Mr. Fury?
Here.
Mrs. Walker?
Here.
Ms. McFerrin?
Yes.
All right, and please join me in the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. We ask for guidance and direction in all city matters before us tonight. We give thanks to be able to be together. Let us continue to strive to make our community a better place. Help us work together, and may we give our best always. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
United
States of America,
for which it stands, one nation, under God,
under God,
and justice for all.
liberty and
Justice for all.
Oh my God.
Okay.
All right.
I don't think it wants us all to talk at the same time.
That was tough.
It does not.
Yes.
Let's see. Next up is approval of the minutes for the March 19th, 2020 meeting. Did everybody have an opportunity to look at them? I will go around again so we avoid talking over one another. I will ask each of you individually. Mr. Fury, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Thank you. Mr. Barr, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Thank you. Mrs. Walker, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFerrin, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scafidi, any questions?
No, sir. Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Stauffer, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. All right. I'd
Thank
like
you.
to make a motion to adopt the minutes of the March 19th, 2020 meetings as submitted. May I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Mr. Barr seconds. Shannon, please call the roll.
Mr. Bellin?
Yes.
Barr?
Yes.
Mr. Fury?
Yes.
Mrs. Stauffer?
Yes.
Mr. Scafidi?
Yes.
McFerrin?
Did you call me?
Yes, Ms. McFerrin?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Shannon. The minutes from the March 19th, 2020 meeting are approved 7-0. Next up on the agenda is awards and presentations. Shannon?
There are none.
Thank you. Next up is audience participation. Shannon?
I don't believe we have any. Mark, can you please confirm?
That's correct. No one is signed up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is council communication and reports. I'm going to go in the order that I see you guys on my screen. Mr. Fury.
I have nothing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFerrin.
I have no reports other than the ARB will be a virtual meeting on Thursday evening, and you can look at the website for more details on that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mrs. Walker.
I have nothing to report, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scafidi.
I have one thing. The Planning Commission is scheduled for April 20th at 7 o'clock. It will be a virtual meeting. However, that's not been confirmed, so I'm not sure that there will be a meeting. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Stauffer.
I have no report tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Barr.
I have nothing to report this evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. None of my committees obviously have met either. I just want to pass along my well wishes of safety and health to all the residents of the city of Twinsburg. Thank you for doing your part in staying home and doing everything that you need to do to flatten the curve. So I sincerely appreciate it. I know my colleagues on council do as well. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So still trying to stay up to date with county, state officials. We had a conference call this morning. I get updated numbers. Summit County currently has 276 cases. One of the alarming part of that is There's 76 hospital workers that are infected right now. So that's something that we're probably going to be watching a little closer. And there are 16 deaths in Summit County. The city is holding right around 19. And I will preface that we get numbers in for our safety forces. And I've been reporting. I know a lot of municipalities haven't been. I've been trying to keep people up to date. The purpose of that is just for people to just please adhere to our governor's orders and stay indoors, limit your contact with other people. When you're out in public now, please wear a mask. Just take all precautions that you can because, we're still seeing growth. Fortunately, in Ohio, if you've been watching at 2 o'clock every day, we've seen kind of a flattening of what they were thinking would be our initial peak and max of cases. The positive side of that is that it doesn't impact significantly our hospital system and the ability to treat people. However, it does take those numbers and spread them over a longer period of time. So we'll continue to watch that, and I'll report on those as I can. And then I also want to just mention, we're into our first week now with our I guess for what I would hope would be the short-term skeleton crew that we have at City Hall. We have about half of our service workers working. We have just minimal people in every single department. And, our layoffs, which were announced, go into effect this week. And again, this is something, and I think I speak for council also, is one of the most difficult things that we've ever been through. And in the history of Twinsburg, I'm not sure that we've had layoffs like this before. Where we're talking about full-time employees. So hopefully, I know Sarah's going to talk a little bit tonight about our income tax collection and the expectation over the next few months. But it's just been a really challenging time. But I know I probably speak for everyone that we'll work as hard as we can to get us back to as close as possible to normal operations as soon as we possibly can. So I know we're going to be looking at a lot of different things over the next few weeks, and really watching to see where the state goes and where, nationally where we're going. But again, it's been a lot of people contributing to, where we're at today. And I must say that, I know it's frustrating, and it's probably nerve-wracking for a lot of our employees. The ones I've talked to and dealt with have been very gracious, understanding that this isn't just a Twinsburg thing. This is a worldwide thing. So we'll be working hard to get through it and just, keep doing what we're doing, because I think it is making an impact. And then on a lighter note, I want to thank Derek and Jen and Brandon and Dan and Mark for the Easter drive-by with the Easter Bunny. So this was something that was kind of a last minute. We had purchased a ton of candy for our candy scramble, and we had costumes rented. And Derek came to me and said, "Hey, I got this idea," and I said, "I think we can make it work." And we ended up putting it together. And I know Mr. Bell and Mr. Barr came through, but it was a fantastic event. I mean, I had an absolute blast. It was nice for me to get out of the house. And at one point, I think we had cars lined up from the outdoor pool all the way to Ravenna Road. So we gave out probably 300 to 350 bags of candy. I know Mark took 480 pictures, which was 2 for each car. So we had about 250 cars show up. And, I know the residents really appreciate it. And the fun part was just seeing the kids kind of laugh and smile and look like kids again. It's, they've all been cooped up, and it was kind of fun watching, because windows were down and kids were screaming at each other from cars because they hadn't seen each other in so long. So I'm glad that kind of came together. I think it was great for the community, great for all of us that were able to attend it. So thanks to the people that worked that and helped put it together. So, and that is all I have this evening.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next up on our agenda is department head reports. Mayor, I know that you had sent those along. Do you want me to read them? Would you like to read them? How would you like to handle that?
I don't know that we need to read them. Those were, for council. I think, we can try to get together a summary and get it out, get it posted. I know Sarah is with us tonight, so I know she's going to give a short report. But other than that, I think we can probably just see if we can put together something in writing and get it published out there.
Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Bucci-Gross.
Good evening, Council. So through the April collections, our income tax revenues were looking pretty good. We are actually up 12%, which is about $860,000. The bulk of that is from one of those net profit tax estimates that we received, which was $500,000 of that. So that depends on if we get to keep that money when they file their tax return. We did get estimates from Rita this week on what our potential losses could look like. So there's an income tax loss projected of $2 million, and then another $3.5 million in delayed payment. So that's going to impact us through November. So that's $5.5 million swing against what we had projected for this year. Now, the general fund, we had budgeted that we were going to use up a bit of reserves already. So those kind of hits to our income tax revenues are unfortunately why we're making some of the decisions that we're making right now, like layoffs and delaying certain capital projects that we can. But like I said, through April, our income tax revenues did look pretty good, so that will help us out, hopefully. So what we're going to start trying to do now is look at all of our other revenue sources and see where we think the impact is going to be there. Obviously, our fitness center has been closed. We haven't opened up golf yet. Gas excise tax might be down just because people aren't filling up their tanks as much. So all those things we have to include in that revenue analysis so that we can really see where we need to go on the expense side of the budget. And I think that's where we're at right now.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any other department heads that are going to be joining us this evening?
No, there's not.
All right. Then next up then will be legislation. Again, as a reminder, just so that we don't talk over one another, I will give each of you an opportunity to discuss each of these. First up is Ordinance 32-2020.
Ordinance accepting the bid of Nero and Sons Incorporated for the 2020 sewer improvement project.
All right. I'd like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 32-2020. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Barr seconds. Discussion. Mr. Fury.
I understand that in order to save our reserves for this year, this project will be pushed out, so I plan on voting no on this.
Thank you, sir. Ms. McFerrin.
I agree with what Mr. Fury said. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Walker. Mrs. Walker.
Okay, I don't know if you called my name because everyone's going in and out, and I'm going to agree with Mr. Fury and say no.
Okay. Mr. Scafidi.
Same here, based on our discussion in caucus, I will be voting no as well.
Mrs. Stauffer.
Same as the others.
Mr. Barr.
I'll be voting no on this evening as well.
Thank you. Mayor Yates, Mr. Maestros, anything to add?
Nothing, thank you.
No, I think this is these were projects, these are multiple projects that we had discussion with engineering, just regarding the ability to look at them again next year. So this is something that, again, as Ms. Bucci-Gross was saying, we're trying to minimize the amount of capital expenditures this year in light of what's going on.
Thank you. Shannon, please call the roll.
Mr. Bellin,
No.
Mr. Barr,
No.
Mr. Scafidi,
No.
Mrs. Walker,
No.
Ms. McFerrin,
No.
Mrs. Stoffer,
No.
Mr. Fury.
No.
Ordinance 32, 2020 fails 0-7. Next up is Resolution 34, 2020.
Resolution authorizing the continuation of various agreements under the Community Reinvestment Area Program created pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 3735.66 for real property tax abatement.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 34, 2020. May I have a second?
I'll second, sir.
Mr. Barr seconds. Discussion, Mr. Fury.
This is a reauthorization of the CRA or Community Reinvestment agreements that are already in place and were voted on individually by City Council in the past. Once a year, the Tax Incentive Review Committee reviews CRA and top agreements to make sure that the commitments made by the companies are being met to earn that discount on new construction or on new payroll. And the companies listed in this resolution are all in line and were voted on by the board to continue the current agreements.
Thank you. Ms. McFerrin, anything to add?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Walker, anything to add?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scafidi, anything to add?
Nothing more.
Mrs. Stoffer, anything to add?
Nothing more.
Mr. Barr, anything to add?
Nothing additional.
Thank you. Shannon, please call the roll.
Mr. Bellin,
Yes.
Mr. Barr,
Yes.
Mr. Fury,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Scafidi,
Yes.
Ms. McFerrin.
Yes.
Resolution 34, 2020 passes 7-0. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Maestros, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to skip over you. I apologize. Next up is Resolution 35, 2020.
Resolution authorizing the continuation of various agreements to provide tax incentives under the terms and conditions of the Twinsburg Occupancy Program established by Ordinance 144, 2004.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 35, 2020. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Barr seconds. Discussion. Mr. Fury?
This is the reauthorization of the Twinsburg Occupancy Program, where if a business remains in the city and that we can accommodate, we give them a discount on income tax for the new payroll that they would bring in. And again, these were reviewed by members of the county, the school board, and the city and were unanimously approved to be continued for one other year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFerrin?
Oh, sorry. I have nothing to say.
Thank you. Mrs. Walker?
Same thing. Nothing to add.
Thank you. Mr. Scafidi?
Nothing more. Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Stoffer?
Nothing.
Thank you. Mr. Barr?
Nothing additional.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Nothing more.
Mr. Maestros?
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. Shannon, please call the roll.
Mr. Bellin,
Yes.
Mr. Barr,
Yes.
Mr. Scafidi,
Yes.
Ms. McFerrin,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Fury,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Resolution 35, 2020 passes 7-0. Next up is Resolution 36, 2020.
A resolution amending the Twinsburg Occupancy Program Agreement between the City of Twinsburg and Leanda Corporation as recommended by the Tax Incentive Review Council.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 36, 2020. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Barr seconds. Discussion, Mr. Fury?
This is a reduction for Leander on a top program. It slightly missed the goals for the new payroll, and the recommendation of the board was to reduce it from 33% to 25% for the year of 2020, and it'll be reviewed next year to either reinstate it fully or deal with it in other ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFerrin?
I have nothing to add.
Thank you. Mrs. Walker?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scafidi?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Mrs. Stoffer?
Nothing further.
Mr. Barr?
Nothing additional.
Mayor Yates?
Nothing else.
Mr. Maestros?
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. Shannon, please call the roll.
Mr. Bellin,
Yes?
Mr. Barr,
Yes.
Mr. Fury,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Scafidi,
Yes.
Ms. McFerrin.
Yes.
Resolution 36, 2020 passes 7-0. Next up is Resolution 37, 2020.
A resolution amending the Twinsburg Occupancy Program Agreement between the City of Twinsburg and HC Companies as recommended by the Tax Incentive Review Council.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 37, 2020. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Barr seconds. Discussion, Mr. Fury?
This is another top agreement that's being amended, reducing the benefit from 40% to 30% for the year of 2020, and it'll be reviewed at the next annual meeting to decide whether we're going to reinstate it or alter it further. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFerrin?
I have nothing to add.
Mrs. Walker?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Mr. Scafidi?
Nothing more.
Mrs. Stoffer?
Nothing more.
Mr. Barr?
Nothing additional.
Mayor Yates?
Nothing else.
Mr. Maestros?
Nothing, thank you.
Shannon, please call the roll.
Mr. Bellin,
Yes.
Mr. Barr,
Yes.
Ms. McFerrin,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Scafidi,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Fury.
Yes.
Resolution 37, 2020 passes 7-0. Finally, this evening, we have Resolution 38, 2020.
Resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation to participate in the Odot's road salt contracts awarded in 2020.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 38, 2020. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Barr seconds. Discussion, Mr. Fury?
I'll pass this time.
Thank you, sir. Ms. McFerrin?
I have nothing to add.
Mrs. Walker?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Mr. Scafidi?
Yeah, this is through the Public Works Department. We last year was the first year we purchased our road salt through the Odot program. Odot's requirement is that when the new year comes up, which is now they're going to be going out for bids for the snow season of 2020-21. So all participants, all municipalities that plan on participating need to turn into them a resolution from their passed by their council, authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with ODOT to participate in the program. And at the same time, Chris Campbell will also have to submit his quantities for the next snow season as well. So this is a requirement of ODOT, and that's why we're doing this.
Thank you. Mrs. Stoffer?
Nothing further.
Mr. Barr?
Nothing additional from me.
Mayor Yates?
Nothing else.
Mr. Maestros?
Nothing, thank you.
Shannon, please call the roll.
Mr. Bellin,
Yes.
Mr. Barr,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Fury,
Yes.
Ms. McPherron,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Scafidi.
Yes.
Resolution 38, 2020 passes 7-0. Next up is unfinished business, new business, and miscellaneous. We'll go in reverse order this time. Mr. Maestros.
Thank you. Actually, I don't have anything at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Nothing for me.
Mrs. Bucci-Gross.
Nothing from me.
Mrs. Collins.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Mrs. Stoffer.
Just wanted to tell everybody to stay safe and healthy and keep social distancing.
Thank you. Mr. Scafidi.
I have nothing further tonight.
Mr. Barr.
Just one quick thing, nothing that requires council's immediate attention this evening. I received an email suggestion actually from a resident regarding other municipalities possibly outfitting city vehicles with like Wi-Fi equipment and allowing them in times of need like this to be able to access free Wi-Fi. Certainly it was a really great idea, just something maybe we can all discuss after we move through this, but it did seem like a pretty nice idea to be able to provide those that don't have Wi-Fi or are less likely to have Wi-Fi internet access the ability to do that using like a city vehicle as a temporary mobile hotspot, if you will. And I just mentioned to the resident that I would bring it up at tonight's meeting, something we can certainly discuss down the road, nothing that is anything pertinent at this time. And again, I'd like to thank everybody at the city for the drive-by Easter Bunny. That was a great time. It was nice to get out of the house. And just hope everybody stays healthy and safe. And I can't wait to see you guys in person. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mrs. Walker.
I just want to thank Mr. Mayor and Mr. Maestros for being so diligent in informing us of everything that we need to know that's happening around and in Summit County. And a special thanks to Shannon. She personally came over to my house, gave me some pointers on Zoom and brought the ear pods. And, she really didn't have to do that. She could have said, come down to City Hall and pick it up, but she didn't. She personally came and gave that to me. And thank you, Shannon. You went above and beyond your duties. You do such great work. So I thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. Ms. McPherron.
Well, I wanted to thank Mark and everyone at City Hall who put this together for us to have our virtual meeting. And I see our list of attendees have gone up from, I think they were up to 29 now. So thank you for everyone in the city that joined in on our first virtual council meeting. And I want to thank all the residents for all they're doing to stay safe. And just as a reminder, we're all in this together. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes.
I have a small one. We're all in this together. So thank you all.
Stay safe.
Indeed. Yeah. And I just want to echo what everybody else said. Stay home, stay safe. If you do need to go out, follow your social distancing. I do think it's pretty cool that we are able to do this virtually and continue to run the city. I think it's awesome that there are 28 attendees right now. I can't remember the last time there were 28 members in the audience for a council meeting. So I hope that continues once we get back to some version of normalcy here. We have no members to excuse this evening through the power of the internet. So now I would like to make a motion to enter into an executive session to discuss matters pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 121.22G14 personnel. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Barr seconds. Shannon, please call the roll.
Mr.
Can we
Bellin?
discuss this?
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Fury. Discussion. Mr. Fury.
Just a hands-on. Are we are we still planning on disconnecting from this meeting and going to a different web? Because I have not seen a link for the executive session yet.
It should appear in your email. It should be in your email now.
I have it now. Thank you very much. I didn't see it a minute ago.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Bellin, if I could, while we have a pause, on the next page of your agenda that you're looking at, this would also include negotiations. If we could just
I'm
have the
sorry.
record.
I'm
That's
sorry.
right.
Thank you, Mr. Mason.
Thank
This
you.
will also include negotiations. We will reconvene and report on the executive session afterwards. Any other discussion?
No.
Shannon, please call the roll.
Mr. Bellin,
Yes.
Mr. Barr,
Yes.
Mr. Scafidi,
Yes.
Mrs. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Fury,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. McPherson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Again, we will reconvene to report on the executive session.
Good night.
Good night.
All right,
Bye.
Twinsburg.